So you said Atlanta. Were you there for the concert then on the 19th?
No, I didn't go. I was supposed to set up I did. I set up the after party. They asked me to set up the after party, so I actually did that. And I was planning on seeing him at the after party, but of course he canceled that. He was ill and canceled it. So,
That was just to get you excited. Nobody said there was a party on the 19th, did they? Or the 20th, but I'm going to tell you the truth. Last we left off at the end of part 2, we were talking about the beginning of 2015. And that's where we're going to go now. I wanted to take you back to the Beautiful Ones book because, again, we talked about how Prince didn't host journalists, etc., and that it would be really weird that he would make a book deal. Also, on page 19, check it out, you guys. Dan writes that when he was meeting with Prince, that Prince and he left the conference room, got on an elevator, and pushed the button for the bottom floor. Prince didn't ride elevators, calling them the devil. This is just another reason we know there are multiple Prince identities. Listen, on page 20, Dan writes that Prince drove him out into Paisley's main lot, that there were people around, but no one seems to point or wave in recognition. I feel it's noteworthy that Prince was driving a black Lincoln MKT and not the black Cadillac Escalade described by Ray Roberts that was in the parking lot the morning of the 21st, typically driven by Kim Pratt. Chris Gaither said that Prince had to be driven everywhere he went and that everything was way off. And that's why this Prince was driving the MKT themselves. And then what's really interesting is on page 23, Dan writes that he sees Prince turning out of the Country Inn and Suites parking lot, idling in front of the bank, afro looming disproportionately. He's driving that same MKT. I believe that date was 1/30/2016. And MKT is so close to MK Ultra, you know. I looked it up. The Americana Bank that was across the street from the Country Inn and Suites where Marone was living in room 127, they would have had this footage, you guys. Perhaps that's why their camera footage was grainy and unusable according to the investigation, but they took it into evidence anyway on a USB drive. That evidence would show what time Marone went home and other things, what time Kornfeld checked in, etc. It's no wonder we don't get to see it. I believe it's noteworthy that Dan, when he's writing, he says that the stage setup for the Piano and a Microphone tour was occultic. He goes on to say that Prince said after Denise Matthews died that he was new to performing alone. Dan notes that sometimes Prince would leap up from the piano as if in awe of it, referenced it as theatrical. Now, in part 2, I had mentioned how the concerts were different and how the performances were different because it's not the same as what we once knew. Anyway, the next day, Dan writes that when he went all the way to Australia, I believe it is. They flew him like 23 hours out to Australia. They tell him to go wait in a suite next to Peter Bravestrong's suite. And all he heard in the next suite was feet shuffling around. And then Kirk kept coming back and talking to him about Peter Bravestrong, that he would call him on the phone. So they were hiding this Prince persona. Dan, he said he was led back to his room by Kirk and told Peter Bravestrong would call, having just left his suite. Sorry, I get ahead of myself and I talk about this stuff and then I realize I have it written right here. My bad. Dan heads to an after party. We're waiting about 90 minutes for Prince. That's because they had to get this person ready. He appears and sits in a dimly lit room with Dan and others. Dan writes that Prince says, convince them they need to put everything behind me for this book deal. I don't want them publishing like it's some sort of little book of poetry. Prince Rogers Nelson never pushed anything on anybody, okay? Meeting with Prince on page 32, Dan says that he was encouraged to take notes by being handed a pen and paper by Prince, even stating that he demanded he write down certain things. As I noted previously, you guys, that is not the way Prince Rogers Nelson did business. On page 34, Dan speaks about Prince's excitement over his new passport and how it was featured on CNN and Time magazine. Prince said, maybe we should use that on the cover, referencing the book. We need to get this weird. We need this to get weird, quote unquote. That's what he said. Trust me, and it already is. Now, on Friday, March 18th, to celebrate the publishing arrangements, he tweeted at 4:40, why is Prince in New York right now? They said Prince didn't use a cell phone. How is he tweeting? They want us to believe he was carrying a laptop everywhere and posting to Princegam and Twitter and everywhere with a laptop. No, this person used a cell phone. They just deleted that evidence too. So, one moment. Another that's something it's important to know is that when Dan meets Kirk, and he's referring to Kirk all throughout the book, he referred to Kirk as a big guy, a bigger guy, like a big bodyguard type guy. Kirk Anthony Johnson is 5'4" and not big. I referred to this with the Molian landing. So anyway, back to 2015. I wanted to, take you through what Dan said, because when they got the book publishing going, it was 2015. Phaedra was coming back. Here, the Carver County Sheriff's Office has, false alarms, fire alarms, nothing real dramatic. I just put some of it in there, person with an allergic reaction. Because we are still in 2015, I want to share with you something, because as I'm always talking about pharmacology and Andrew Kornfeld and Schulenberg and those type of things, this is the Minnesota Safe Script statistical findings for 2015. I'm going to skim them, but if you want to look at the whole thing, they're here. But what I want to show you is that over 8.1 million prescriptions for federal, those controlled substances were dispensed in 2015. The highest were Vicodin, amphetamine, and oxycodone. The top 1% of prescribers contributed to 20% of all of those substances. That's a lot of prescriptions. Now, I just want to show you something. That was 2015. And then in 2016, it was over 7.8 million prescriptions were written, having dropped from 2016 because of the death in April, because of what they stopped doing. There was a 4.3 decrease from 2015. So I think that that's really, really relevant, you guys, and to let you know that I don't play around with my research. However, we're still in 2015. I mentioned in part 2 about the Obama concert that Renville Wellington, the mysterious bodyguard, he set up a GoPhone on 6/9 of 15. You can see that 6/9 and 1 plus 5 is 6. That would be 666 in reverse gematria. But anyway, he set up this GoPhone, prepaid customer 1234 GoPhone Way. This was just a week before the Obama concert. So they added on this Renville Wellington, this Canadian mysterious bodyguard that Chris Wagner is always asking for information about. And then, of course, just a week later, there's that concert, which Prince had turned down prior, and now all of a sudden there's the concert on 6/15 of 15. Now, also, Michael Schulenberg tells us that Kirk Johnson, who was present this was when he was interviewed on April 21st. Kirk Johnson, who was present this morning, has been a patient of mine for probably 16 years. And last fall, Kirk contacted me to see if I would be open to helping him with his boss. At that point, it was just to do a checkup, do a physical. Nothing ever came to fruition with that until about 2 weeks ago, April 7th. I received a message, I think at 5:45 in the morning. So here we established that Schulenberg said he was initially contacted in the fall of 2015 because they were seeking out doctors for these substances that they were seeking continuously. So we heard Deborah Johnson speak in part 2 about how Phaedra and Van Joan and Diane Frappier were setting up these new articles of incorporation for the NPG publishing. And the first time they did that was here on 12/1 of 2015. Now, the address used at that time was 1611 Telegraph Road, Suite 600, in Oakland, California, making it all the more interesting that on one 26 of 2016 that the articles of incorporation were filed again, but this time using the Audubon address. However, you'll notice that the e-resident agent number is the same for both filings. I think that's unusual if one was filed in California and the other in Minnesota, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Seems like it would be two separate numbers and two separate people. Yet both of these are signed by Erica Easter. So 2015, 2016, we have the Piano and a Microphone tour going on. Now, it's really relevant to know that this print that you see here is print work. It's called print work for a model, okay? Now, Natalia Phillips, she takes credit for print work during the Piano and a Microphone tour. Here's part of her bio. Let's see. Oh, actually, this part says that she did part of the featured actor in Princess 3121. Here's her print work, H&M, Frito-Lay, Kodak. Prince, 2016 Piano and a Microphone tour. This is the same young lady that I showed you that was playing the piano. She is an actress, model, singer, songwriter who grew up with her father. I believe it's Michael Phillips or John Phillips. Anyway, this is why I make reference to that print work, because again, if you put a wig and, chest wraps, you can do anything with anybody, whether it's Natalia Phillips, Marone Bakir, Kirk Johnson, it doesn't matter. Check out the jawline. Here we find out that the music business is nothing new to Phillips. Her father is Alan Phillips. I was guessing on the name. Here it says that Phillips, then at the age of 10, made it on the radar of the casting director for Prince. He cast her in a number of music and film projects, and so it wouldn't be unheard of what I am saying. So you don't know who this is in this print work. Now, throughout 2015, 2016, here we are in January, and Marone Bakir, who again was working as one of the lookalikes. Marone Bakir. She also had a very busy Twitter at that time and was saying, get your tics here, which, you might not think is such a big deal, but if you were performing as Prince, such as Julia Ramadan when she was posting on her Instagram, then you might want people to buy your tickets. You can see the dates on this last invoice. This is the invoice that was sent allegedly at 8:03 on 4/20/2016. It was about $192,000. But the time frame for this was 1/9 through 2/8. Taika was paid $10,000. Marone Bakir was paid $6,800 for a week. These people were paying themselves outrageous sums of money. KAJ Productions, which is Kirk Anthony Johnson Productions, they were producing the music and paying himself. Marone Bakir, $6,800. Now, something you might find interesting if you're watching the file is that this Magpie Toronto, this is because Renville Wellington is a Canadian bodyguard, and this is a clothing store in Toronto called Magpie Toronto. Just an interesting tidbit for you there. February 11th, 2016, the new passport hit, the one that the Prince that Dan Brown met with said, we should use that as the cover to the book. We need this to get crazy weird. This is the passport that CNN was promoting. Remember, Van Jones worked for CNN. They wanted to make sure they blasted this image everywhere. Natalia Phillips. Marone Bakir. I don't know. What do you think they were trying to look like? Imitate? I have shown this so many times, and I will do it again. This passport photo and this jacket were seen worn by this person leaving the Jimmy Kimmel show. Same paisley jacket, same collar, and a Third Eye Girl mini dress skirt. I'm not sure, but the point is that this person has a little tummy, an electric fetus perhaps. So early 2016, Carver County is reporting that a female called and wanted a welfare check done on the office. When asked who they were checking on, the caller stated that they were asking for too much information and hung up. So there was constantly weird stuff going on at Paisley Park. Now on 3/18/2016, that's when I told you earlier that she tweeted, "Why is Prince in New York right now having a cell phone?" Here's that tweet. Now, I showed you earlier that Magpie Toronto store was being paid. Then there was the concerts in Montreal on 3/21/2016. On 3/19 in the West Village, Dan writes that there was a party, and that was the last time that he physically saw this person, Prince. And then it was early April that Kirk contacted him to ask him for the previously handwritten pages that they had discussed in Australia. Dan goes on to write on page 40 of the Beautiful Ones book that Phaedra ascertained a one-time power of attorney on 4/7/2016 to sign the book contract in Prince's absence. Why was Prince absent in early April, and why did Dan last see Prince on 3/19? These are just questions you might want to ponder. As we discussed, I believe in part 2 with Phaedra, she should have never been given signing power, POA, power of attorney, because of her embezzlement charges stemming from a 2004 incident in Irvine, California. Then there was the tweet. It said, "Despite influenza, this world is priceless," and then it was deleted a few days before the concert that was allegedly the last one on the 14th. ABC News, this is what we are all shown of the Moline landing, because now we're going to enter into April of 2016. The media reports one thing, and I'm going to report a whole lot of other things. So, yeah, this is about all we see. The aircraft was traveling to Minnesota from Atlanta, where Prince had performed before the emergency landing at 1 a.m. Friday, April 15th, 2016. That's what TMZ told the whole story. That's everything. And, even though they said it was for the flu, they later said he was treated for an overdose because they used the opiate Narcan. Anyhow, note the time, emergency landing at 1 a.m. Friday, the 15th. I'm going to explain to you why that is a complete and utter fabrication and is only one of the plane landings. Before I get to the 15th, I'm going to take you back to the 13th, because that's when Judith Hill tells us she was first contacted by Prince to see if she wanted to see his concert. You should know that Prince Rogers Nelson, his name was never used in the request for assistance. The EMTs met the flight at Quad City International Airport in Moline, where the flight made an emergency landing at 1:17 a.m. after departing at 12:51 a.m. and descending 45,000 feet in 17 minutes. You guys, that's extremely fast. So anyway, this is the flight information they give. My video called the investigation of the witnesses, Judith, Hannah, and Josh. It's extremely detailed. It's about an hour and a half long, and it gets very in-depth into Judith's, her interview. I was looking at the birds outside the window, woodpeckers and stuff. Now, during her very lengthy interview, she makes it sound as if she traveled twice. She refers to the night, overnight. Combine that with the way that she says she was asked, "Hey, do you want to go to my show today?" Something happened overnight on the 13th, the evening of the 13th into the 14th. And then another landing or more was perpetrated and then sloppily documented, which is why we have Moline. Detective, can you start with, was that planned months in advance, weeks in advance? No, it was the night, overnight. They never say what day. They never specifically say April 15th or April 14th. It's like that night or that plan or his or him, but never the actual people. So when was it planned? When did you know that you were traveling? Judith says, I spoke with him the night before, and I had no plans of going to Atlanta. And then the next morning. He said, hey, do you want to go to Atlanta with me today to see the show? Now, you guys, read that again. When she says, Nelson asks her, was it planned months, weeks in advance? She says, no, it was the night overnight. And then she says, did you, traveling? She spoke with him the night before. So that references us back to the 13th already. And then because she says she had no plans of going to Atlanta with him, and then the next morning, he said, hey, do you want to go to Atlanta with me? That's the morning of the 14th. So she was referencing the 13th and the 14th, not the 14th and the 15th. Okay, then when did you first see Prince, Mr. Nelson? Notice the name change. They do that all the time. It's never Prince Rogers Nelson. She says we got a late start that day. So he picked me up at the hotel noon or 1-ish, maybe even 2, the detective says. Late afternoon. And the detective Nelson says, okay, and this is the day before. And Judith says, this is the day of the show. So again, what they were talking about prior was the prior day, the 13th. And then they went into talking about the 14th, the day of the show. Now, to back up what I'm saying, Dr. Elizabeth Boo, the dentist who the media doesn't talk about, but the investigation does, initially she asked if they wanted to talk to her about the elevator incident with Prince and asked if she needed an attorney. When the officer told her he couldn't give her legal advice, she decided to just tell the investigators the story. According to Dr. Boo, she said that Kirk called her the morning of Thursday, April 14th, about a crown prep he had scheduled for later that afternoon. She didn't start work until 2. That's the same day that it was reported that Kirk Johnson flew out of Minneapolis at 2:32. Now, she didn't start work until 2, and that was the same day that Kirk also contacted Dr. Schulenberg on 4/14. So he didn't just contact Dr. Schulenberg for the Percocet. He contacted Dr. Boo, and she prescribed 10 Tylenol 3 with codeine. The media just doesn't talk about that. And then the funny thing is, Kirk goes on to say, look, Kirk told me he did not know where Prince was obtaining the narcotic medications. Kirk told me that Prince never asked Kirk to get a prescription for him. The writer goes on to say, I would later find out this information contradicts the statement provided by Dr. Schulenberg when Dr. Schulenberg admitted that he gave the prescription Percocet to Prince, but the prescription was in Kirk Johnson's name at Kirk's request because he didn't want Prince to be tied to the narcotic medication. Again, with the lookalikes and dress-ups, Kirk was one of them. I told you before on part 2 that the appointment on 10/23/13 was Kirk's. So just remember that when they tried to add to the confusion. I'm going to get you through it. So my point is about him Kirk contacting Dr. Boo the morning of the 14th. That was after the flight that Judith was referring to. And then Dr. Schulenberg as well. Now, something you need to know about Kirk's phone records is the detective said that they had to decipher his phone records in UTC time, which is Universal something time, I'm not sure. And that was 5 hours behind Minnesota time. So when you're looking at, for instance, when you're looking at Kirk's provided phone records, and it says 13:01 there at the top, that's allegedly 1:01 in the afternoon. However, when the detective said that they had to decipher in UTC time, they were subtracting 5 hours from that time that he was in Minnesota, and then I believe 4 hours from the time he was in Atlanta, Eastern time. So when you look at these, it says that it was outgoing at 1 o'clock, but it was really 8 o'clock in the morning. So while we're here, let me show you something. Do you see where this is highlighted, Dr. Schulenberg at 13:03? That's 1:03 p.m. Notice that the calls are incoming, not outgoing. Okay. Notice that at 1:10 p.m., which is again 8:10, if my deciphering is correct, that Dr. Boo is calling in. And then Dr. Schulenberg, there's a 7-minute voicemail going out. So this all would have been the morning of the 14th, not the afternoon as the media suggests because of the UTC time on the records. So back to her, Judith, being picked up about maybe even 2 o'clock. She says late afternoon, the day of the 14th, she is being picked up by somebody she believes to be Prince or Prince Nelson. Something very important that you all need to know about Renville Wellington's Go phone and what Judith is saying about being picked up between 12 and 2. When you look at Renville's records, you can see that there is contact made at 12:02 p.m. on the 14th, all the way through, I'll probably have to go to the next slide, 4:14, all the way through 2 p.m. So from 12 to 2, Renville Wellington, I believe Kirk or Prince's lookalike, I'm not sure who's playing who here, was texting, and this is who picked up Judith. However, as I disclosed in the Moline video, this investigation is so twisted and fraudulent that Kirk's phone records that we're looking at here, you see how the time 11:57 at the top left corner, it says Kimberly Pratt, total transportation driver, all the way down to 12:03. And then again at 13:40 to 13:44, 1:44, etc. It says Kim Pratt, total transportation driver, right? Tell me why these texts that are provided for Renville Wellington starting at 11:57, 12:02, 12:03, all of these dates and times match up with the records that are provided as Kimberly Pratt. See, 12:02, 12:03. It's as if the investigation has Kimberly Pratt and Renville Wellington's phone records as one and the same. That's how shystery it is. Fun, right? Interesting to know that Renville Wellington, the Canadian bodyguard, allegedly, his phone went silent on 4/14 at 2 p.m., and it went silent until 1:32 a.m. on the 15th, which would coordinate with the time that there was a plane landing. Okay, so there's that. I'm not there yet. Detective Nelson asks, so when you flew out, who all was on the plane? Oh, it was just Prince, me, and Kirk. So they fly out, they get to the venue, uneventful. They said Prince slept. Judith goes on to say the first show was at 7:30, that they were running late, and they were pretty much getting there around that time, around 7:30. So she said they had a quick sound check and that they had to be police escorted to the venue because they were running late, and that they were doing that at the Pantages Theater. Now, what's interesting about that is the 14th, the performance was at the Fox Theater in Atlanta. I don't know if that's the same theater, the Pantages, if I'm saying that right. So I don't know if she's referencing a different theater because I actually didn't do that research. She goes on to say there's another thing. There was, before the first show, or after the first show, when he was more depressed, talking about all those things, there was a guy from Electric Fetus, which is a small independent record shop, and he had one of the younger guys that owns it come out and sit here and talk about business things like we want to do this and that with the store. So that was it. So yeah, a business owner from Electric Fetus is going to fly out just to talk about business at a concert performance? I don't think so. So then she goes on to say, so at the show he performs, this is Chris Nelson. He performs 2 shows the night of the 14th, and you mentioned that a couple of people popped in while you guys were there, and she asked if he spent time with any of those people, and she says, no, not for that Atlanta trip. You know there were others. So Chris Nelson asks, okay, so the second show ends about what time do you think? Judith said, well, it started about 10:30 or something. It's about an hour and a half show. So 2 shows the night of the 14th, one about 7:30 and the second one starting about 10:30. Why is it that Betchholt, pilot 1, tells us that when Prince arrived at the airport, he was part of a motorcade? Betchholt said Prince was amped up, which was in contrast to Prince's behavior prior to the concert. Betchholt said Prince, Kirk Johnson, and the same young female boarded the plane. They departed around 22:30 hours, and again, Prince requested the cabin door closed. That, folks, would be 10:30 p.m. So Judith just said the second concert started at 10:30. I ask you, who was departing at 10:30 and requesting the cabin door closed? Pilot Gallus accessed his flight tracking software from his smartphone and gave these detectives the flight info that said they departed Minnesota at 2:32 p.m., arrived at Atlanta at 5:30, departed Atlanta again at 12:51 a.m., 11:51 Central. So while this detective was flying at 10:30, or excuse me, pilot was flying at 10:30, this pilot was flying at 12:51 Eastern, midnight Central Time. So those are distinctly two different flights, as I told you. Scenes. Now, when we look at Kirk's provided phone records for the 14th, and again, remember they had to be deciphered in UTC time, which is negative 5 hours. So where it says 056 at the top, we normally would think that that was, 12:56 a.m. and 1:09 a.m. and 1:40 a.m., etc. However, if you subtract 5 hours from that, we're talking about 7:56 a.m. And that would coincide with all the calls being made to Dr. Boo and Dr. Schulenberg and the incoming calls between them. Kirk wasn't contacting them. They were making incoming calls. So the records that are provided, they're just pieced together to make this scenario what it is. So it's noteworthy that on 4/14/2016 from 7:56, if I'm doing that right, to 3:21 a.m., there were 11 incoming calls to Kirk's phone, and not one of them had a response to it. So that's really strange, and that would coincide with one of the plane landings as well, being coordinated during those times. The one that Judith was talking about on the 13th, and they're using these phone records to pattern. It's just that janky. I may not have it all correct, all the I's dotted and T's crossed, but we're getting there. So technically, when Judith was asked how they left the venue on the 15th, she said, we just go down to the elevator, get in the SUV, and back to the airport. Again, here's the prince that she's with getting in the elevator when the Let's Go Crazy said, don't let the elevator bring you down, don't use the elevator. Chris Gaither even said that he referred to it as Satan. We all know that by now. So Judith and Nelson, okay, and you get back to the airport and out of the SUV, you're there, you're at the airport, you go through security, Kirk is with you. Can you remember when you go through security? Judith says they don't go through security. We go straight to okay, because you're flying. Yeah, I get it. The reason I read that and I read it like they do it is because the detectives are always interrupting the people that are talking as if they don't want them to finish their sentence. Because I know from reading the files that Judith could have been about to say something about the ambulance, but Chris Nelson interrupts her and says, oh yeah, because you're flying. No, you need to stop doing that. And so then she says, so you're able to go straight to the plane. That's like badgering the witness, if you will, putting words in her mouth. You're supposed to ask questions, not give them information, Chris Nelson. And then Judith goes on to say, the SUVs just take us straight up and drive us straight to the airport. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I didn't really think much of it, she says. He just sat there, Prince, and talked to me a little bit and asked me if I needed a cough drop because I was coughing. And so I was like, no, I'm okay. Gets up, goes to the back of the plane, fiddles with his bag, and he's fiddling for a while, and he comes back and he hands me a cough drop. And I was like, okay, thank you. And then he goes back to his bag and he's fiddling for a while again and finally comes back to the table. And he's talking, about wants me to stay with him in Paisley Park for another day so we can watch movies, hang out for a while. And then he says, but we'll see. I just might need to sleep, get some rest. And I was like, yeah, sure. Whatever you need to do. And that's when it happened, Judith said. The lady had already brought him food and he just took a couple bites and then he just looks down and it looked like we were both going to kind of prepare to sleep or whatever. It was just his eyes, they were fixed. He just kind of looked down and he did one of these and then again this, and then he went like that. Okay, and I thought it was weird. Okay, and was Kirk sleeping during this time, Nelson asks. Judith says yes. She goes on to say, I don't know. So he gets up and he sits next to Prince. Kirk, this is what she said. Here, Kirk was sleeping. See, was Kirk sleeping? Yeah. Well, then how can she go on to say, I was like, I don't know. So he gets up and sits next to Prince, and that's when he shakes Prince. Nothing. I was like freaking out. We both got up. Kirk and I went straight to the cockpit, and we're like, land, we have to land. So then we got back in the back, and they're still holding Prince, and he's like, Prince, shaking him, no response. And I was asking if his heart was beating, and he felt his chest, and he said, yeah, and he kept shaking him, nothing. And he said that the heartbeat was really irregular. And then, Mrs. Hill, did you have any inkling of what was going on, or were you thinking something? And she says, yeah, I thought he was dead. I was like, he looked dead, and I was freaking. My heart was pounding. That's when I was asking if his heart was beating, because he looks lifeless and not alive. Okay, Miss Hill, oops, same thing. So no response, no nothing. He's just limp. We're shaking him, and there's nothing. Kirk said his heart was still beating, but that doesn't mean that it was. And then, okay, so there's a pilot and a co-pilot. Are they in the cockpit during this entire time? She said, yeah. Well, Betchel, the pilot that left at 10:30, he recalled during the early part of his flight that the flight attendant checked on Prince and told the pilots that Prince and Kirk were hugging. That would mean Kirk wasn't sleeping, and, what were they hugging for? Nobody ever said anything about that. Not Judith, not Kirk, not anybody. Betchel said Kirk later came to the cabin to request food for Prince. Betchel stated it was sometime after Prince was served food that Kirk again returned to the cabin and told the pilots, hey, Prince isn't doing good. Betchel told his co-pilot, Gallus, that he was leaving. He grabbed the portable oxygen canister when he left. So that means that Betchel did go into the back of the cockpit, because then when he returned, he said, we got to land now. And at that moment, they were closest to Moline, and they were on the ground within 10 minutes. Okay, so that's not the same as Judith saying that there's a pilot and a co-pilot and they're in the cockpit this entire time. And she said, yeah, that's not the same scenario. Do you see how it said they were on the ground in approximately 10 minutes? So this flight, they were on the ground in less than 10 minutes later and beat the paramedics. However, here Judith is testifying. She says, we finally land, and then the paramedics come onto the plane, and in my opinion, they were moving far too slow. She said, we've heard someone's unresponsive, but, they're still alive. She was like, it's just frustrating me. So finally, they're like, can we move this table? And I was like, is the ambulance here? And they're like 5 minutes out. So it was okay. So, I can't even read the way she talks. She's talking about how these people that looked like paramedics came onto the plane, talking about moving the table, move this table. And she's like, guys, can you just hurry up? This is kind of an emergency. So finally, someone just picks up a leg and an arm, and they all kind of just carry him out into the ambulance and get him onto the bed. So everyone grabs a limb and carries this person out of the plane and onto a bed, right? Is that what you heard? Because that's not what I heard, and that's not what EMT Fredrickson said. He said when they arrived, the EMT from Moline, that the plane had already landed and the stairs were out. He said he grabbed his gear and his cot. He observed a guy in a black suit carrying a little guy out of the plane like you would a little kid or a baby. Now, he described that person as a big dude, African-American guy wearing a dark suit. That's the same way that Dan Piepenbring, the author of The Beautiful Ones, described Kirk as a big African-American guy wearing a dark suit. Again, the media alleges that Kirk Johnson carried him off the plane, but Kirk Johnson is not a big dude and he's 5'4". He wouldn't be carrying another guy off the plane like a baby. So whoever this was that was carrying him off the plane was obviously different scenario than what Judith is saying, where everybody grabbed an arm and a leg and carried him into the ambulance. Clearly, you guys, 2 separate exits from the plane. And also, Judith said earlier that she, Kirk, and Prince were the only ones on the plane. However, when you look into the DEA's investigation, they list how much time they spent with the occupants of the plane. And it's kind of off subject, but the DEA has, again, when they are doing the investigation, they refer to this police officer as a she. And during the investigation, no police officers are investigated that are a woman, first of all. But they do, and they say that they spent about 10 minutes with Prince Rogers Nelson, or Prince, or whoever, and then 20 minutes with the occupants from the plane. However, if Kirk, Judith, and Prince were supposed to be the only ones on the plane, then who are the occupants? Well, when we're talking Josh and Hannah, they're being interviewed. Josh says this: no, I mean, as much as we know, just on the plane, Kirk had made the call, and Kirk had told us. And Hannah pipes in and says, to land it. Yeah, to land it, because he wasn't himself and wasn't responsive. Okay, and so when they landed in Moline, so again, if you guys don't follow the investigation as closely as I do, this is Josh and Hannah Welton being interviewed, husband and wife, drum player, and Josh, her husband. He said on the plane, Kirk made the call. Kirk told us to land it. Judith said Kirk was sleeping, that he was shaking Prince to see if he was alive. But notice how he says he had to tell it because he wasn't himself and he wasn't responsive. They make it sound like Kirk was talking about himself. Because like I told you, dual identities. It's the Kirk Prince. Now, Theo London, he, at 23:15 is into his interview, he tells us that he saw Prince with his own eyes. And I mentioned that, I think, in part 2. So Theo London was on the plane and said he planned the after party that Prince did not attend. But that time they were referencing the 19th. Anyhow, the media story is that when that plane landed, Prince was given an opiate Narcan for a possible drug overdose. They call it a possible drug overdose, and no EMTs or emergency personnel report one of those electric heart monitor thumpy, the thing they use to charge your heart back into beating. But when Judith is being interviewed, she says, okay, so this is in, Chris Nelson says, okay, so you were in the back of the ambulance initially. This is taking place. And Judith says, oh no, this is like when we were all just standing around before we had took in our actual seats. And Judith says they hit him with that thing. And they were like, now she says, is that in the back of the ambulance? And she says, yeah. And she says, I'm kind of still, and everybody's just kind of standing there. We're all standing in the back of the ambulance. It hadn't moved, and he was just in the bed, and they hit him with the thing, and then we got situated, and Kirk decided to sit back there, and I decided to sit in the front, and then the vehicle started moving, and blah, blah, blah. So Judith Hill, in her testimony, describes a very different scenario than the DEA was investigating. And here is some of that language right here that I mentioned earlier. Interview with Officer Blank. Officer Blank recall of the incident was consistent with his report that he wrote. What is that? That doesn't tell us anything. Officer Blank was not equipped with a body camera, and his squad car does not have a video recording system. How convenient for 2016. Officer Blank, total amount of contact with the occupants of the plane was approximately 20 minutes. Officer was asked if he saw anything out of the ordinary inside of the airplane, and he described it as very clean. Officer estimates that he had contact with Prince Nelson for approximately 10 minutes. That is not the same scenario as Judith Hill is telling, where this lifeless Prince was being saved off of a plane, hit with one of those things that I can't even think of their name right now, and they're all standing there before they get into the back of the ambulance. That is not contact with the occupants of the plane that include Josh and Hannah and Theo London. Here's what I mentioned earlier. Police department, according to Officer Blank, she was working in the capacity of a police officer the morning of the incident. So when the DEA returns this paperwork, I believe that they were talking about possibly the other morning of the 13th, 14th that the 13th and 14th that Judith Hill referenced early on in this video. There were definitely multiple landings, and that's why the paperwork is so shoddy and like nobody can put it together. So, now here also the officer responded to the runway gate to allow blah 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 to attend to the patient inside of the airplane. So we're never told that there was any services given inside of the plane. We were told once that he was carried off by an African American big guy, and then Judith said that they all grabbed an arm and a leg and carried him off. So who was the patient inside of the plane that the DEA was talking about with the female officers and the occupants? Understand, for you that are reading the investigation, the art of trickery is in the words that they use. Let me explain. They say Lombardi showed Fredrickson a driver license photo of Kirk Johnson, and Fredrickson confirmed the big dude carrying, who he later identified as Prince, out of the plane was the same person, Kirk Johnson. So most people would read that very quickly, and they would assume that Fredrickson was confirming that the Kirk Johnson was carrying Prince out of the plane, but that's not what he said. He said he later identified Prince and Kirk Johnson as the same person. That's the one that was being carried out of the plane because of the look-alike situation. Now here, Fredrickson said he attempted to go up the stairs and meet them, but Kirk Johnson told them that he would be coming down. Fredrickson said at first he thought that the person being carried was an older female because they were wearing glittery gold clothing and shoes. Why would Fredrickson say they were wearing gold clothing and shoes? Because they means at least two people, doesn't it? It does. When Rands and his crew arrived, they were met by airport security and noticed the stairs to the plane were down. Rands and crew started to walk to the stairs and were stopped. Rand said he was stopped by Kirk Johnson, who said, "No, we will bring him out," meaning Prince. Kirk then carried what Rands described as a lifeless body, which turned out to be Prince. So I don't know. That's about 3 or 4 different landing scenarios. None of the scenarios go together, but I'm presenting them to you in the best way possible. Now, remember earlier when Pilot Betchel said that he left Atlanta at 10:30. They departed around 22:30, which is 10:30. That's what Betchel said. However, Moline Fire Department report says that on 4:15 they were dispatched at 1:17 a.m. to the patient who was unresponsive. That patient was being carried out of the plane, later believed to be Kirk Johnson. It's all in the way they word it. The male, believed to be Kirk, said that the patient had taken 1 Percocet and was completely unresponsive with a respiratory rate of 3 to 5 breaths per minute. That they administered 2 milligrams of Narcan with no change. Then they administered another 2 milligrams, and the patient took a big gasp and breathed spontaneously, at a normal rate. That is not the same scenario as the DEA and the police report. That is not the same scenario that Judith Hill told. This is a different scenario. And obviously a very different time, because Betchel took off at 10:30 and this plane was dispatched at 1:17. Also, DEA Lombardi asked Fredrickson, who was riding in the back of the ambulance while en route to the hospital. Fredrickson said it was his partner, Austin Rands, Prince himself, and the bodyguard. Now, when Judith was talking earlier, she said that's before they had all taken their seats. Here, Judith goes on to say this is when we were all standing around before we had taken her seats, before they hit him with the thing in the back of the ambulance. They were all standing around outside the ambulance, and that's when they decided to take their seats and sit where they did. Yet another Narcan scenario is that paramedics gave Prince a shot of Narcan, and Prince immediately took a big breath. Here, they say they gave a shot of Narcan, not 2 milligrams IV. Here, when they say they administered 2 milligrams of Narcan, and you look into the medical reports, that's with an IV. This Prince got a shot of Narcan and immediately took 1 big breath. That's a save shot right there. And according to Rands, he said that was a sign of an overdose emergency, but nobody ever confirmed that there was an actual overdose. So I'm just saying that it becomes obvious later that Narcan is a pain reliever, and it's also used for other medical conditions. So the fact that this several different scenarios used Narcan, there's other reasons for it, you guys, and it wasn't just because somebody was a drug addict. Here they talk about Judith allegedly riding in the front seat like she said she did. After everybody took their seats, she chose to ride in the front. But Fredrickson, he said that the bodyguard, it was either Renville or whoever was playing bodyguard, didn't want the female to talk to Fredrickson. And then here again with the trickery. Lombardi had shown Fredrickson a photo of Judith Hill and asked if she was the female who was with Prince and Kirk Johnson. Fredrickson confirmed the girl to be Judith Hill. It's the way they word it. They don't expect anybody to read it that closely. But when they show somebody a driver's license photo, and he says Leon was very quiet, showed Leon a picture of Hill, and he confirmed Hill was the passenger who rode up front with him. You guys, you don't know who is who. And might I remind you that Judith Hill is not a young, light-skinned, pretty female. She's slightly medium-skinned, a little bit darker, with a little bit darker hair. And I wouldn't call her, a young girl like these people did. So I'm pretty sure they were referring to somebody else. Not only that, Detective Leon Rands, whatever his name was, pardon me, EMT Rands, he said that the call that he got came in late at night. His crew was sleeping, that he was on crew 12, closest to the closest fire station to the airport. Fredrickson said that he was assigned to Station 3 in Ambulance 13. There's that 313 again. Think about what time Dr. Schulenberg was contacted. It was 313. Think about what I told you with Jorge Pope Bergoglio taking office on 31313. It's always 13. Always. About the Narcan. Kirk said when Prince went to the hospital in Moline, they gave him something to take him out of the unconsciousness. Kirk told me during the interview with the doctor that Prince admitted he took 1 to 2 pills, which Kirk thought were called naloxone. The detective writes that naloxone is sold under the brand name Narcan, which the paramedics used to treat Prince. I believe Kirk was confused when he told me Prince took naloxone. So what I'm saying is, this detective is writing that he thought Kirk was confused when he said that Prince was taking naloxone, which is a Suboxone or Narcan in pill or under the tongue form or whatever the case may be. And remember, Ray Roberts, the chef, has a prescription for Suboxone too. So all of this talk about Suboxone doesn't necessarily mean that somebody had a drug addiction. Let's just keep going. Dr. Mancha, the doctor in Moline, she said that Kirk followed her out of the room and expressed concern, asking her if Prince could have really died. Mancha said she explained Narcan to Kirk and even wrote it down on a piece of paper and explained how serious it was. Dr. Mancha said she got the impression from Kirk that he had no idea what Prince was taking. Dr. Mancha said Kirk told her that when they got back to Minnesota, that Kirk would take him to a doctor and get Prince help. So if you read this the way I am, Kirk is finding out that this alleged Prince or somebody is taking naloxone or Narcan. Now, if you take an opiate such as Percocet while you're taking naloxone, you're gonna have some issues because that is a blocker and you're not supposed to feel the effect of drugs and it can make you very, very sick. So that's one combination that could have happened there with some of the scenarios and those so-called fentanyl-laced hydrocodone that were found in all of Kirk Johnson's medical bottles. To further, explain what I'm saying about the Narcan, you guys, Dr. Schulenberg tells us that when he was contacted, when they got back into town and Kirk was trying to research and find out what this naloxone Narcan was, that Schulenberg was being asked if he could prescribe Suboxone, which makes a drug user not feel the withdrawals that they're having. So think about this. If your name is Kirk Johnson, for instance, and you're playing Prince lookalike, and you have stage fright, and you have to take a bunch of drugs before you go on stage, and oops, accidentally take too many, or somebody from Electric Fetus gives you something that, you shouldn't have mixed with something else, and then your plane makes an emergency landing, something like that. The paramedics come and save you with naloxone, Narcan. It takes you on a trip, which he later talks to Judith Hill about, and then he gets back to town, even having Dr. Mancha write it down on a piece of paper to try to find out what this medication is that will bring them out of their pharmacology-induced drug stupors. Okay, so Dr. Schulenberg was then contacted to find out if he could prescribe this anti-withdrawal medication, Suboxone, but he said, no, I've not gone through the training, so I don't prescribe Suboxone. Okay, Chris Nelson says, you have to go through training to prescribe that. And Dr. Kornfeld's out in California. He runs the addiction medication or medicine specialist. Now, stop right there. The way that Schulenberg said, and Dr. Kornfeld's out in, why would he know of Dr. Kornfeld before enough to say he's out in California? He shouldn't have known about them, where Dr. Kornfeld was at that time. So anyway, they get back to town and reach out to Dr. Schulenberg. He can't prescribe the Suboxone. Now, I told you guys before that Andrew Kornfeld, they say during the investigation that he took a red-eye flight from California out to Minnesota because Howard Kornfeld couldn't make it. However, if you watch his individual video and here today, and I break down Andrew Kornfeld's emails, he says on 4/20/2016, hey, I have an interview in Palo Alto on Friday. Should be done by late afternoon. Any chance you're free and want to hang? Palo Alto is in California, you guys. So, again, if you watch his individual video that I have here on YouTube, you'll understand that he was working at Paisley Park, doing his pharmacology, doing, all kinds of things with drugs that they weren't supposed to be doing. And he went back out to California. And on 4/20, he was out there, which is why Schulenberg said, and Dr. Kornfeld's out in California, okay? And then that's why earlier Kieran Shaw said that Phaedra already had that connection with Recovery Without Walls because Phaedra's sister had gotten services from them before. So they tried to say that they sent Andrew out there, but he was already there. He had just come back. That's all. There's that email. Now back to Schulenberg. Schulenberg, you guys, just to let you know, when he said, after the first conversation with Phaedra, I texted Kirk to say, I hope this is legitimate. I'm just going to leave that there. And he texted back, yes, thanks. Why would he hope their conversations were legitimate if there was anything legitimate about what they're doing? Now, Judith Hill goes on to say, Prince Kirk was trying to get a hold of Kirk for what's that? I don't remember why he wanted to get a hold of Kirk. It must have been something small, but I think he wanted to find out what the name of this drug was that they gave him. That's exactly what I just said. Kirk was trying to find out what the Narcan was so that he could use it to come out of his drug stupors. Judith says that was like a thing, and Kirk got the name of it and stuff, and so he wanted Phaedra to investigate it. Okay, and so the last time you spoke with her, had communication with Prince, was on what day? And she said Monday. That would be the 18th. Monday, okay, yeah. So Judith Hill says that she last saw Prince on Monday the 18th, okay? But I need to jump back to something real quick. In Moline, Judith goes on to say that she really felt like the Prince that she saw there, that he was dead. In her mind, this person was dead. And what's relevant about that is because when Chris Nelson is going on to interview her further, she says, okay, any more talk about the Percocet on the way home, and she says no. Or about the mystery drug in the Bayer bottle? No. How about after? How about after the hospital? After the hospital, after Prince's passing? So some would say that they were talking about after the 21st. But if they were talking about the Percocet and the Bayer bottle and the investigation and Judith at the same time, they were talking about this Prince perhaps passing at the hospital in Moline. So then that would explain why Kirk Johnson would set up Renville Wellington to go make this fake plane landing. You guys, it's very deep and very undercover. Like I told you, Paisley Park, bigger than the other White House in Washington. I've mentioned to you guys before that I was told in my life after that there was a dark, occult, heinous plan for the Creator and his manly soul body that he showed to the world as Prince Rogers Nelson in human form. That occult plan on 4/21/2016 would have never let any of this information that I'm exposing be exposed. However, there was talk of a suicide to avoid the occult ceremony. And that's as much as I'm going to say on that. However, Judith and Kirk, this is what they had to say when asked about the word suicide. Judith said, Kirk was just like talking about, he's just like, it all makes sense now. He kept saying that he knew this whole time. That's what he kept saying. It was just like, and telling him about how, we're planning on these summer shows. And he would say to Kirk, like, if I'm not there, you're still going to do these shows. He would say, if I'm not there. These are just crazy statements, she said. And Chris Nelson says, so some of the things that you're telling us, I mean, I hate to use the word suicidal, but does Prince seem kind of depressed? And Judith says it was 50-50 for her. Here Judith says, because he did the show, I mean, Phaedra said that he took the test and that they took blood and everything on like Tuesday or something, Tuesday the 19th. And that was a huge victory. Like, he never would. So he was definitely trying and he wanted it. But I think there was still a lot of his statements that were also accepting that he might not make it. It was that kind of stuff. So she's talking about a person, a Prince persona, that knew that they were dying. And if you think about what I said on 10/23 of 2013, that person who was seeing the doctor said that they declined the Zofran and vitamin D because they were trying to be as natural as possible. And don't forget, Taika was known for saying she knew her brother was going for about 2 years or more. And don't forget that in My Life After Life, the one the world knows as Prince Rogers Nelson showed me his manly image, his otherworldly image, and all these other images. And it is a wild paranormal story, you guys, but there was somebody who was dying. And that's why all this information was given to me on that date in July, because somebody was dying somewhere. Even after all that, after this life and death experience, Prince allegedly comes back to Paisley Park. Judith says he was silent on the way home, but when they got back to Paisley, that Prince tweets at 11:30 a.m. after practically dying, and then somebody else is tweeting this, I am transformed at 11:33 a.m. What do you think about that? Transformed by drugs? Transformed by Narcan? Probably tweeted from the laptop, though, since he didn't have a cell phone. Here, Judith goes on to explain that she was dropped off at Paisley, had lunch, didn't talk much, go upstairs to the green room. If you go upstairs, it's just directly above, next to the stairs. You go into this little foyer, and then there's this bedroom. Is it green? The green room? The green room? The green room. Yeah, the green room. Okay. And do you know that to be his bedroom? Yeah. They use it like a code word. That's why I read it like that. Think about how when you go to see Oprah or Ellen DeGeneres or any other chat show, they have you wait in the green room. Things happen in the green room, don't they? Anyway, Judith says she left that day, stayed with him upstairs and watched a few movies, and then her flight was that evening. Okay, and you said that he was talking to you about how he wants to do a show or throw a party and show people that he's okay. And Judith said, yeah, that was the next day, the 16th, obviously, Paisley Park Without Dark. She said he wanted me to tweet that I was in the show, at the show, and that everything was amazing, just to, tell a lie, right? And that everything was great. To cover. So, in Moline, we were told that the plane, well, one was at 10:30, the other landed at 12:51. But here on Kirk Johnson's phone records, it said the majority of the texts were made 4:15, starting at 1:32 all the way up to 12:43 on 4:15. There were 49 texts back and forth. And as I told you guys, the phone that is provided, the records for Renville, Wellington, go silent on 4/14 at 2 p.m. and then pick back up at 1:32 a.m., which is where this detective says that those 49 texts started back and forth with Kirk and Renville because they were doing the dual landing. Now, remember I told you that Kim Pratt's phone records show the same thing if you missed that. Relevant also, I mentioned earlier, you guys, that Judith said a guy from Electric Fetus, the record store there, Recasto, in Minneapolis, that the guy would come out and talk to them during a concert. Yeah, last minute. She said that, well, I'm saying that Electric Fetus is the record store cover. It seems to be that they deliver to concerts, and that's why the famous photo, do we have it here? This photo, yes. This is Electric Fetus. This is allegedly a photo of Prince on the day before he died at Electric Fetus. Now, again, black hat, black clothes could be anybody. Anyway, after somebody dying or almost dying, the 14th, the 15th, having the Paisley Park After Dark party on the 16th that Judith tweeted so everybody would think that everything was okay, here, this Prince tweets on April 16th, please support your local record store today. Throat clears to attract attention. Electric Fetus. That, they're making a call for the Electric people to come visit them so that they can have the party, Paisley Park After Dark, on the 16th. Okay? And then there's the infamous tweet of controversy when he got home from the hospital. Here's that image. They were just displaying the hit and run poster in the window at Electric Fetus there. Electric Fetus is a part of the team. Why would they celebrate all these victories, tweets, and saying that's how we roll, and everything like that? Here, Marone on the 16th is saying that's how we roll. Great team. Thank you. Like, why? Why are you a great team after Prince Rogers Nelson allegedly just died, overdosed something in Moline? You know, great team. That's how we roll. At Electric Fetus, Minneapolis, again with the Electric Fetus. Do you remember when I pointed this out in part 2 that this Prince persona that took this passport photo wearing this jacket was then photographed leaving Jimmy Kimmel looking like a pregnant woman? Electric Fetus is a code word for this way that they, I don't know, do what with these occult ceremonies and the intellectual property of the creator. I'm just not sure what it is, but I don't know if I want to know. So Paisley Park After Dark party on the 16th, okay, and on April 17th, he says he, not Prince Rogers Nelson, tweeted out a photo of Rekisto dress with fam like this you can't miss. And Rekisto is Electric Fetus, so that's another word for Electric Fetus. So on the 17th, they were tweeting for drugs, if you ask me. Now, gets pretty thick in here, and I know this is a long video, but I want them to be coherent and make sense. On April 17th was a Sunday, and Kirk said that he did not think that he saw Prince. He doesn't think he saw him again until Tuesday the 19th. Remember, Judith said she saw him last on the 18th. Kirk saw him last on April 19th when they had a meeting with Prince, Larry Graham, Barone Bakir, and Kirk. He said that Prince had canceled shows Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of that week, being the 18th through the 22nd, and because of what had happened in Atlanta with the Moline landing, that they were trying to urge Prince to take a break. Yeah, right. Now, Schulenberg said that on 4/18, that's the day that Kirk doesn't know if he saw Prince, that Kirk had texted Schulenberg asking for Schulenberg to call him. According to Schulenberg, he said Kirk called, and during that conversation, that Kirk was concerned about Prince using opiates, and that's because he was trying to find out what the Narcan was, as I referenced earlier. He wasn't concerned about Prince using opiates. He was like, hey man, all the opiates we've been using, now we need to get some Narcan to bring him out of this, or me out of this, or whatever the case may be. Because ask anybody you know who might be addicted to drugs, if they don't have any drugs, they can take Narcan or Suboxone, and they won't have withdrawals as bad, or at all. So anyway, here's Kirk texting Schulenberg Monday, 18th. Can you call me when you get a free moment? I want to get some more recommendations. I'll see you tomorrow. So why was Kirk telling Schulenberg, I'll see you tomorrow, which would be the 19th? Everybody's in way deeper than the media would allow you to know. Here on April 18th, again, remember, Kirk said he didn't see Prince until the 19th. On the 18th, they're calling for Electric Fetus again. Got to get that pharmacology going on. Now, remember, Monday the 18th, Tuesday the 19th. Larry Graham said that Monday the 18th, that Prince had just gotten back from a tour. Graham stated Prince looked tired from being on tour, but overall looked good. Graham said that he hadn't seen Prince much lately, but on March 23rd of that year, 2016, that Prince came back from Canada to attend the memorial at the Kingdom Hall with him, the memorial of Christ's death. And that they spent time together on the 18th in the NPG small room. Okay, so Larry Graham says they were together on the 18th, and remember, Kirk is texting Schulenberg saying, see you tomorrow, and Kirk said that he didn't see Prince until the 19th. So everybody's lying. Anyway, let's continue. Josh and Hannah, they were being interviewed, and they said, we saw him on Monday. We went out on Monday to the movies. That would be the 18th, you guys. And we went out to eat and watched a jazz performance at the Dakota, and that's the last time we saw him. Monday the 18th. How could they be at the movies, at the jazz club, and meeting in the small room with Larry Graham and Marone? They said, we just want to have a good time with them. So, that's as much as we wanted to do on Monday. And we went to the movie, and he was walking and talking. What kind of statement is that? And we were just joking because we went out to the Dakota first, the Dakota Jazz Club, and then to the Beach Club to eat some food and kick it, and then we went to the movie. So they were busy all day, Monday the 18th, all night there with Prince, according to them. And that was just a normal night for us, Last month they went out to the Chanhassen Theater. That's just how it is. And, just kick back and relax. So like I said, it's no different from the past. I've seen him in a few years, and, Chris Nelson says, yeah, and Josh says, all of a sudden, just saw something fatal crazy, you know what I mean? No, we don't know what you mean, Josh. Why don't you tell us what you saw that was fatal crazy? Everyone and no one are where they're supposed to be. St. Louis Post-Dispatch reports that Prince was supposed to play some concerts at their Fox Theater on April 18th. Those concerts were canceled last minute, in which coincides with what Larry Graham says when he says that the night of April 18th, Prince had just gotten back from a tour. So how could Prince be getting back from a tour while Josh and Hannah are at the Beach Club and everywhere? Everybody's lying. Come on, people. So Steve Littman, the promoter of that show that was supposed to take place on the 18th, or did take place, he said they had everything set to go, the artwork, the press releases, the tickets, but Prince had suddenly taken ill and didn't want the shows announced. And so that's where Kirk tries to say that they met with him and tried to get him to take a break, when actually they were obviously trying to get somebody to perform. So it says Prince was notorious for setting his own schedules and thrived on last-minute announcements. That was because I told you he didn't know if he could do it or not with the pharmacology and everything. Now, the thing is, between Monday and Tuesday, the 14th and the 19th, nobody knows where anybody is and all these lies. Now, Kim Pratt, the limo driver, she goes on to say that on 4/19, she drove Prince to the Dakota Jazz Club, but she doesn't say what time. She stated that Prince went to go see the new artist and was looking forward to having them at Paisley. Then they went to the Dakota Beach Club with Marone, Josh, and Hannah. Remember, Josh and Hannah said they were there on Monday the 18th. You can say, oh, they just forgot, but no, just stop. Now, Kim said they went to the Edina Theater, whereas Josh and Hannah said they went to the Chanhassen or Chan Theater. Okay, so here, Kim stated that she dropped Prince off about 2 a.m. and Marone at the Country Inn and Suites. Yet, Kim Pratt also said that when she last saw Prince on the 19th, she saw Prince before he passed. Now, keeping that in mind,
frequent places that he loved to go, and I was with him Tuesday night before he passed. And, his frequent places that he loved to go, and I was with him Tuesday night before he passed.